right, ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited to be here today with the Washtenaw County Prosecutor, Ellie Savitt. We've had a long professional relationship, but I've also known Ellie on a personal level because he has dominated me more than one time on the basketball court. I always respected him for his hustle, his ability to rebound, and he has a much more coordinated jump shot than me.
You got to defend the 15-footers. Lost art of the mid-range jumper.
So, Ellie, thank you for taking time out of your day today to talk about a very important issue in our community. And before we jump into talking about the Drive Safe Michigan movement, or also known as the driver's license for everyone, I want to get a little bit of background and experience into position today. Specifically, rumor has it that you at one point in your life clerked for the Supreme Court of the United States. Can you confirm, is this rumor true or not?
I can confirm that. I had the tremendous opportunity to clerk for the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It was one of the honors of my life. Of course, I miss her greatly, as does the nation, but she taught me a lot, and I try to keep her passion for justice and how the law can really meaningfully impact people's lives in a positive way close to me, whatever I do.
When you were clerking in this position, what were the assignments that you were working on, or what does a Supreme Court clerk do?
Yeah, so in brief, you really are the justice and helping the justice do everything that a Supreme Court justice does. So you'll make recommendations and write memos about whether the justice should vote to have the Supreme Court take a case in the first place. And then, you know, if a case is taken by the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court decides to hear it, there will of course be oral argument, and the clerks will read the briefs filed by the parties, write a memo to the justice, which sort of breaks down the legal issues and gives a recommendation as to how the justice should vote on the case. You know, there could be some back and forth there. She might tell you, run down this case, or you might want to look at this treatise, or I have a follow-up question as to your recommendation here. And then the best part of the job is after a case is decided, if the justice is writing an opinion in the case, either a majority opinion or concurring opinion or a dissenting opinion, the clerk actually gets to work with the justice, write the first draft, and then there's a back and forth process where, you know, she was editing our opinions, making it, of course, her own voice. She is a fastidious editor and writer. And my favorite part of the job was after you'd gone through, you know, however many drafts, and she believed that the opinion was ready to circulate to the other justices, she would call you into her office, often late at night, because she would work very late hours, and you know, you would be, if you were working with her on an opinion, you could expect to stay until about 4 a.m. But she'd call you into her office, you'd sit around a round table with her, just her and you'd go through every single word in the opinion to make sure that every word was right, that it meant what you had meant it to mean, and that the opinion flowed. And I just learned so much about the law, about writing, about precision through those sessions, through her attention to detail and her care about getting everything, as she liked to say, right and tight.
So could you tell me about a case or some cases that you worked on that were really noteworthy or that really stick out in your mind?
No, because Supreme Court clerks are actually bound by confidentiality. So even now, obviously the opinions from the year that I clerked there are published, they are law, but you still can't pull back the curtain on anything that happened behind the scenes. What I can tell you is, you know, what is public record, which is some of the cases that were up before the Supreme Court my term. And the biggest one, the most memorable one, I think for everybody working there, was Obergefell versus Hodges, the landmark case that found a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. So that was a huge moment for our country. It was really grateful to be a part of it at the Supreme Court, and I'll never forget, walking outside the day that opinion was released. And of course, in the building, we all knew it was going to happen that day. But there was a spontaneous celebration on the steps of the Supreme Court, and one of the things that just struck me was the sort of National Gay Men's Choir was singing "America the Beautiful," and it was so beautiful. But to think that these were folks that only a couple decades earlier had their love criminalized and upheld by the United States Supreme Court, and here they were with their marriage and their love at long last finally ruled to be a constitutional right. It was one of the most beautiful things that I'd seen and sort of been a part of in that moment.
Nice. So let's talk locally, because I know your roots are here in Ann Arbor. I can honestly say there's no one that loves Washtenaw County more than Eli. His heart and soul is definitely intertwined with our community, and one of the beautiful aspects of our community, probably in my opinion the most beautiful, is that diversity that we have here. So as a prosecutor, what type of involvement or what have you done to help out the immigrant community here in Washtenaw County?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of things, and I want to start with what should just be considered, I think, basic, which is trying to increase our accessibility in terms of language. For a long time, we have had translators on call, language line services. So if you call the office, as a victim in a case, as a witness in a case, you can have a translator. What we didn't have actually was our written materials were never translated into other languages, and so we would give crime victims, for example, or domestic violence victims, or people that were seeking to establish child support, we would give them a pamphlet about it, with the court process and what they could expect written down. But we only had that available in English. And that struck me as really unfair and something that we needed to fix, because it's one thing to call on the phone, right? But a lot of people, can use a resource that they can refer to over time. They can explain exactly what's going to happen. Look, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, and I think we both know the court system can be really confusing, even to those of us with law degrees sometimes, right? And if you think about it, the victim of a crime, somebody that's, going to be the witness in a case, somebody that's seeking some sort of services from the office, we owe it to them to do everything we can to provide information and explain it to folks in their native language where we can. So we got all of our materials translated, from victim service materials through information about criminal record expungement, our conviction integrity unit, our child support unit, our economic justice unit. We have all those materials now available, not just in English, but in Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, Korean, and Dari as well, which are the 6 most commonly spoken languages in Washtenaw County. And that's just, basic accessibility of our office. Substantively speaking, one of the things that we really wanted to prioritize when I took office was moving quickly and expediently on the certification of T and U visas. Just for folks that may not know, a U visa is a special type of visa that a non-citizen can get if they helped out in a criminal proceeding, if they were the victim of a certain type of crime, if they served as a witness, if they reported something to the police. And a T visa is a special visa for people that are victims of human trafficking. Now, we all know that one of the biggest problems with our justice system more broadly is that a lot of people don't feel comfortable reporting crimes, serving as witnesses in a case, and that can lead to more harm. And for folks that are perhaps non-citizens, the fear of deportation, if they become involved with the justice system, is a real hindrance to reporting crimes. So we wanted to make sure that we sent a clear message, and we said, look, these visas, we will sign off on them, assuming that we legally can, and they'll be turned around in a couple weeks. And that's just about building trust so that we can get the cases in, so that we can keep our community safe, and the people don't feel fearful coming to law enforcement, coming to the prosecutor's office, serving as a witness in court. And at the end of the day, that keeps us all safer, right? And then the other thing that we did is, we put out a policy which said, look, we are going to consider somebody's immigration status when we are prosecuting a case and trying to figure out what is a fair resolution if we're considering plea bargaining, because the truth of the matter is there are a number of things that wouldn't even lead to jail time for a citizen like me that can lead to deportation for folks that are non-citizens. These could be folks that have been here for decades, right? They may have families here, their entire support network could be here, and it's just not fair to impose that type of consequence if we can avoid it. Now, obviously, if it's a violent crime, you shot a gun at somebody, there's nothing we can do there. But for some things like traffic offenses, right? I mean, even some traffic offenses can lead to deportation. How is it fair to just uproot somebody who didn't even do anything intentionally wrong from their entire community, perhaps wrest them away from their family for something that if I did it, it wouldn't even lead to jail time? So we try to be considerate of that and take stock of that. And I think that all of these things, right, accessibility, the issuance of T visas and U visas, and having an immigration conscious way of deciding cases, that all serves to build trust in the system. And again, at the end of the day, that's going to make it more likely that people report crimes, that they serve as witnesses, that they become, voluntarily helpful in the criminal legal system, because all we have at the end of the day is the faith and confidence that the system works, and anything that we can do to support that among members of our immigrant community or other communities is very important for me and for this office.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're saying is if I'm a victim of a crime, even if I don't have legal immigration status, your office would not call ICE or share this information with Immigration Customs Enforcement.
I was so into all the other stuff, but yes, no, we do not collaborate with ICE or federal immigration authorities. This does not mean that that Washtenaw County, that immigration activity from the federal level doesn't occur in Washtenaw County. We have no control over that. But no, if we've got a victim, if we've got a witness, if we've got somebody that's coming through our system, we're not going to seek to have them deported, to call ICE. And again, I really want to emphasize the real public safety benefits of this. If you have a person who may be subject to deportation if they report a crime, if they see a crime, if they are the victim of a crime, and you do not have the type of policy that our office has, they are less likely to report it, right? And that makes all of us less safe. So our job in the prosecutor's office is local criminal justice enforcement, right? It's not to do immigration work, and the more we can keep those lanes separate, the safer all of us are, because we're going to get more cases, we're going to get more witnesses, we're going to be able to proceed successfully in more cases, and again, that makes our entire community safer.
Cool. And touching on the next subject, there is a huge movement going on in the immigrant community here in Michigan where there's trying to get legislation passed that would reinstate the law that we had up until 2008 that allows residents here in Michigan, regardless of immigration status, to have access to driver's license. The first question that I have for you is, do you support this type of legislation, and why or why not?
I absolutely and emphatically support this type of legislation because it makes all of us safer. Look, folks in Michigan are going to drive, right? We are the state that put America on wheels. We have a car culture. It is unfortunately very difficult in a lot of places in our state to get around without a car. So a car is a functional necessity for a lot of people. So you've got a choice here. Do you want the person behind the wheel of a car driving next to you on the highway to be driven by somebody who does not have their license, therefore did not pass the road test, has not passed all the necessary safety qualifications that you and I had to pass to get behind the wheel of a car? Or would you prefer to have that person licensed, have passed a road test, have good vision, right, and have a driver's license? To me, this is an absolute no-brainer. A licensing system is what ensures safety on our roads. And categorically cutting people out of that system who we know are going to drive anyway leads to more danger, more traffic fatalities, and in addition, it leads to a higher volume of people probably engaging in high-speed chases with the police because they're pulled over and they don't have a driver's license and they want to get away, not because they did anything super wrong, but just because they're driving without a license, and that is a criminal offense. So again, to me, this is a no-brainer. I want everybody on the road next to me when I'm driving to have a driver's license, to have passed those tests. And I think everybody should want that as well.
Now, would Michigan be the first state to have this if it gets reenacted, or are there other states that have done this as well?
No, I believe there's 18 states plus the District of Columbia that have passed similar laws allowing anybody, regardless of immigration status, who again passes the relevant tests and safety requirements, to get a driver's license. And this includes, quite frankly, a bipartisan group of states. It includes blue states, right, like on the East Coast and West Coast, and it also includes red states like Utah, right, which is a Republican stronghold. And that's because the leaders in these states have just recognized this makes sense for everybody. This protects public safety for everybody, and it protects all of us when we're on the road.
And what's interesting too, I've read some research that shows that states that have this law, there's significantly higher percentage of people with insurance. So if someone doesn't have a driver's license, it's much more likely they won't have insurance on the vehicle. And I don't know about you, but if I get into a car crash with someone, I for sure want the other person, especially if I'm seriously injured, to have insurance. Specifically, if I'm in the hospital and I want help paying my bills because I can't afford it, it'd be kind of nice to have more people with insurance driving on the road.
Absolutely, absolutely right. I mean, these kinds of laws will ideally prevent those crashes from happening in the first place, because again, we've got a system that will ensure that only those people who can pass road tests, have good eyesight, etc., can be on the road. But yeah, if you don't have a license, if you're operating a car technically illegally, right, you're not going to go out and get insurance, right? I mean, why would you? Because they'd say, well, how are you driving in the first place? So in the event that there are crashes and traffic accidents do happen, I agree with you. If me or one of my loved ones got in a car crash, God forbid, I would of course want the insurance money to be there so they could get the best possible medical treatment to recover.
And my understanding is that driving without a license is a misdemeanor. Do you know off the top of your head?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so doesn't that typically require a court appearance if you're cited with driving without a license?
Yeah. I mean, just like any other sort of crime that you'd be charged with, it does require court appearances.
Okay, and so I would assume then there's a significant cost associated with this too as well. For enforcement, prosecutors have to show up, they have to go through the process.
Yeah, and look, the fewer cases that we don't need to prosecute, right? Because there's fewer crimes being committed, the better, right? I don't think that very many people want prosecutors to be focusing a huge portion of their resources on people that could have otherwise gotten licenses, and as you mentioned, before 2008 were able to get licenses but just aren't able to by law, and focusing a bunch of their resources on prosecuting those cases. Presumably, I think most people would like those people to be able to have licenses, to be safe and licensed, and have prosecutors and police focused on stuff like shootings, homicides, sexual assaults, the cases that keep all of us up at night.
Excellent. Now, for these type of law, once it's enacted, scratch that. I'm going to go to the next question. Do you think this would lead to voter fraud?
No, and it couldn't possibly lead to voter fraud. And the reason for this is because the bills that have been proposed don't give anybody the right to vote that's a non-citizen, because you've got to be a citizen to vote. And merely having a driver's license doesn't automatically add your name to the voter rolls. You have to separately register. You have to be a citizen. You have to be otherwise eligible to vote. So this has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with voting. It has to do with driving and driving safe.
And one thing that's interesting from my perspective, while Ellie was off clerking for the Supreme Court of the United States, I was hustling here in Ann Arbor, and I've done approximately 20,000 consultations with immigrants in the past 10 years. And I can tell you from experience, the number one reason that people would get put into immigration court removal, deportation proceedings, and ultimately separated from their families was a local stop for a traffic violation. ICE gets called, ICE comes and picks up the person and puts them either in immigration jail or takes them down to the ICE office, processes them for immigration court, and thus the immigration deportation removal proceedings start. So from a personal perspective, I think this would have a tremendous impact in preventing people who are following the law from getting put into immigration court deportation removal proceedings. And now I'd kind of like to turn to a little bit more fun questions. What was your first car?
Well, my first car was my parents' old Chrysler minivan that they gifted me when they got sick of driving me to school every day. So it was a, black minivan. It was the opposite of sexy, but you could fit a bunch of your friends in it. So I liked it for that reason.
And you can be honest, did you pass the driver's test the first time you tried?
Oh man, hard-hitting questions here. I did not pass the driver's test the first time that I tried. And the reason for that was that I was unable to back into a parking spot. That's where I knocked over all of the cones. So I had to do it again. I was sorely disappointed. But look, that's why these tests are there. I got denied access to the road until I could learn how to back into a parking space and parallel park, right? That's who we should want on the roads, folks that have passed those tests, unlike 16-year-old me, but like 16-and-a-half-year-old me.
So what you're saying in essence is you actually didn't pass, you were motivated to pass, you went and practiced your driving skills, you got better, and I assume right now you have a valid driver's license?
I do indeed have a valid driver's license, and I can parallel park, even though, I prefer not to.
And that's the whole point, at least from my perspective, why you would want this type of legislation, because it takes people like Ellie. I guarantee you he's probably a little bit intelligent. He didn't pass the driver's test on the first time. With a little practice, he passed. Now he's a much safer driver.
Exactly.
So, that being said, how well do you think you can parallel park now?
I can parallel park okay now. Right? I'm not going to say, who was it on Seinfeld? It was like George Costanza that was like an excellent parallel parker. It's not like one of my top skills, but I can get in. I can get into some of the tighter spots that you need to get in here in downtown Ann Arbor. So practice does make perfect, and I don't think that the state of Michigan has really regretted giving me the driver's license on a second try.
Sounds good. And question, do you know how to drive a stick shift?
Man, you're killing me. I do not know how to drive a stick shift. I don't. It's not something that I ever had to learn. I've traveled to other countries, and I went on a trip abroad with my sister, my older sister. She's about 8 years older than me. When I just learned to drive, and we realized when we got a rental car that neither one of us could actually drive stick. So she took the responsibility of sort of learning on the fly there, which led to some interesting situations. I do not recommend doing that. If you need to rent a car in a foreign country, learn how to drive stick first.
Cool. And then probably the most important question of this interview is, do you like how your photo looks on your driver's license?
You know, I actually do. I didn't the first time I got it taken, but they offered me an opportunity to retake it, which I think is, the kind of humanity and personal touch that we all should want in our Secretary of State's office. So I was really grateful for that, and I'm good with my picture on my license right now. Of course, I'm going to have to retake it at some point, and I'm sure I'm not going to like how much older I've gotten, but at least my face doesn't look goofy in the one that I've got now.
Okay, now, and for people who are inspired to actually help out in this movement, but aren't really sure what to do, is there anything specifically that you recommend doing, maybe contacting politicians, or what would you suggest for someone that sees this video and is like, hey, I agree, I support this movement, what can I do to help?
Yeah, I would absolutely contact legislators, talk about this with your local state senator, state representative. Letters to the editor, getting the word out in your community can be very helpful as well. And, whenever you're having these conversations with politicians or writing something, I would just lead with what spoke to you about this issue. Is it the fact that you think everybody here should be allowed to drive legally because that's so important in the state of Michigan? Is it that you don't want somebody on the road next to you or your kids or your parents that hasn't passed that road test? Is it the fact that we had this law in place since before 2008 and it's only been relatively recently that we got rid of it? Is it the fact that we'd be joining a bipartisan group of states, including Utah, in allowing folks to have driver's licenses? So whatever speaks to you, emphasize that, put that personal touch on it, because I think this policy really is a win-win-win for everybody that will make us all safer, but it's always helpful for folks to hear how it will affect you and why you feel so strongly about this idea.
And I just want to thank you on a personal, Ellie. Obviously we have a rivalry on the basketball court, but this legislation is the most important piece of legislation in my career that will affect the immigrant community, and I've been very involved with the immigrant community. And thank you honestly for being the first politician to open their door for this type of interview so that we get the message out about how important this type of policy is for our immigrants. And really, it's not just immigrants that benefit, it's we all benefit. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for talking about this with me.
All right, take care.